Money Vikings, welcome back. It's been a while. So let's do a video. I'm going to rant and rave while I drive here, but I think I've got some things of value to say that I think will help in your wealth building journey and your true wealth journey and all that kind of good stuff that we do here at Money Vikings. So a couple of topics I want to hit on. I want to talk about Bitcoin. I want to talk about collectibles. I want to talk overall state of things and just sort of some of the strategies that we can deploy in order to continue to build wealth and be strong and resilient as time goes on. So let's start with collectibles. I want to do a little bit of a warning on collectibles. Collectibles are, as many of you know, if you've watched some of our videos, I'll recap. My number one rule with collectibles, you really cannot think of it as the same as an S&P 500 index fund or any kind of, Vanguard or Schwab or Fidelity ETF. Collectibles are a much different thing. My number one rule of collectibles and collecting is that you must love the thing you are collecting. You must somehow find some pleasure, some inherent sort of joy from the object. I think of, like, for example, I do comics mainly, and secondarily I do some card collecting. I mainly think of the comics as kind of miniature works of art. So I think of them as works of art. And what that means is that I really enjoy the artwork of them. I do like when they're in slabs because I like to present them in my office. I like them to sort of be there. I like to rotate through different ones that I really like. And I also focus in on characters and intellectual property that I really enjoy as well. So, I'm a classic guy. I'm kind of, I'm a Spider-Man, Batman, a little bit of Avengers, but not a lot, mainly Doctor Doom stuff, a little bit of Fantastic Four, but not a lot. But anything Spider-Man, I'm pretty into. Spider-Gwen, those keys I'm really into. And Batman, definitely one of my top favorites right there. But the thing to keep in mind with collectibles is very interesting. You have to kind of think about collectibles in terms of decades and generational opportunities. So collectibles are a lot about nostalgia. So when you see the kids right now with the t-shirts on that are the Spider-Man t-shirts and they're 6 years old, or they are waving a lightsaber around at the age of 8, those are the collectibles of the future. Because in 20, 30, 40 years, those kids are going to have nostalgia for that intellectual property, for that world building, etc. And these worlds will continue to be rebooted again and again. Spider-Man's a great example of that. The rights to Spider-Man is a very interesting story in itself, owned by Sony, but then of course there's Marvel and Disney in the mix. But the interesting thing about that is that Sony must make a Spider-Man movie, I think every 3 years and a few months, or they basically lose the rights automatically if they're not making a movie within all that time frame. So if they don't want to lose those rights and lose that cash cow, Spider-Man movies will continue to be made for a long time. And I actually think there's a long runway for them. I mean, the Spider-Verse, you've expanded into so many different types of, spider creatures, etc. I mean, there's just a lot that can be done with these things. There is, of course, a bit of a Marvel hangover, Avengers hangover that has gone down, and I'm sure that whole world needs to be rebooted as well, and I'm sure it will. X-Men, Avengers, all that stuff. You've got, Doctor Doom and all that. Okay, but that's the number one rule of collecting. You gotta, you have to think in those ways if you're in it for some kind of money in the future. Now, key issues, first appearances, those are probably always going to hold some good value. I think there's a long runway on comics in particular. But again, you got to be careful about this stuff. You never know. These things do go in and out of popularity over the years. So just something to consider. There's a classic example of like collecting trains, Lionel trains. Trains used to be a collectible object item that a lot of, I believe, older baby boomers were, and maybe the younger members of the silent generation were into. And that has basically fizzled out. That's not really a big thing as much anymore. Okay, so that was just a couple of things to keep in mind about collectibles. I'm still into key Spider-Man issues. I'm still into key Batman issues. Like I said, I like the classics, but there's a lot of cool stuff out there. And, and the reality is a lot of this intellectual property is worldwide now, and there's many, many ways to sell your collectibles, online, growing ways, of course. One of the frustrations with that are the fees, and that needs to be considered when you're doing selling online. You have to consider transaction costs overall. So just a couple things on collectibles. All right, I still am a buyer of Bitcoin. I'm thinking about it a little differently now. I'm thinking of it as kind of a little of like a savings account. I'm trying to think of it as just another version of cash that should grow better and should help beat inflation, hopefully beating inflation by a large margin. The fact of the matter is that cash is important to have, but cash can also be dangerous as years clip on. So as years clip on, the cash just continues to lose value. And apparently, I believe that Bitcoin has what it takes to not be in that category, but time will tell. And again, I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist, like, taking 100% of the portfolio or 90 or 80% and putting it Bitcoin. But I can definitely see sound arguments for a much higher percentage than what I talked about before. I used to talk about maybe a 5% allocation, but I could certainly see someone with a, good number of assets, good diversification, going maybe into the 10-15% range on Bitcoin if they want. Okay, overall state of things, I think it's still time to double down on the essentials and the fundamentals of wealth building. This is going back to basics on budgeting, and I'm going to do a whole video on this, but what I'm going to do a deep dive on is, there's a few rules of thumb when it comes to budgeting. The number one rule of thumb is to actually take the time to make a budget. And I'm a fan of simple, straightforward budgets. You don't need any fancy software. You need a piece of paper and a pencil. And you're basically listing all of your recurring monthly expenses from largest expense to smallest expense. Don't worry if you're missing a few details at the end or you're missing a couple subscriptions. It's not a game of perfection. It's a game of getting the large things right, because that's a big part of my philosophy, is that if you can get the big things right in terms of budgeting, you're probably going to be in very good shape when it comes to wealth building overall. What do I mean by the big things? The big things are housing costs, not being overextended on housing costs, so having an appropriate rental or mortgage payment every month that is in line with your steady income and your means. That's number one. And then the second biggest thing is probably car payments, and basically making sure that vehicle and transportation costs are totally in line and in check with what you can afford. And when I say what you can afford, that's being under what you can afford, because the car salesman and the house salesman, etc., will push you into numbers that are uncomfortable for you. You have to have the strength, wherewithal, and courage to say no. Yes, you're telling me I can afford a $4,800 or $5,000 a month mortgage, but you know what? I'm going to work really hard to keep that at $4,000. I'm going to push that down, and I'm going to have that extra cushion so I can, number one, live life. I can also save some money and invest some, and have that sort of wiggle room in the budget, as they say. Okay, so that's number one, is actually making a budget, doing it very simply. The second thing is to do some periodic check-ins. You want to check in with that budget, I would say, on an annual basis. Make sure the numbers are still accurate. See how you're trending. Trending is important in the world and in life. Are you trending towards being better at budgeting and saving more? Are you trending at adding more to credit cards and doing a lot of lifestyle inflation? Because if you're trending in the wrong way, you're going to want to course correct, which I've had to do a couple times over life. It's very normal. It happens. So those are some of the essentials when it comes to budgeting. And I do hope that those help you in your true wealth journey. So just a couple thoughts I had. I want to touch on collectibles, touch on Bitcoin, touch on budgeting. Overall, I'm still bullish long-term on the United States. So I'm going to stay heavy United States equities. I just think that that's the place to go. I think you have a lot of dynamism. I believe the United States has a long, bright future ahead of it as we head into a July 4th weekend where we celebrate our great country. And it is a great country. Doesn't mean we're not going to have challenges. Every life and every country has challenges. But I do believe the United States is well poised for a bright future as time goes on and we sort of work through our various problems. With that, have a great 4th of July, and thank you very much for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, all that great stuff if you get value out of Money Vikings, and hopefully see you on the next one. Take care.